Hello there, thanks for stopping by. As you can see, we're not at the boatyard, I'm in my garage today and it's a bit chilly. We're still waiting for boat launch, which is a bit frustrating. So in the meantime, I thought we'd do a little video on the narrowboat ceiling and the design that we're going to try out. So we are messing about with a narrowboat ceiling. So the top of a narrowboat ceiling is arched. It's also shorter or narrower at the top than it is at the sides because it bends in. So we need to kind of figure out how we're going to panel up the ceiling. And there are three general ways of doing that.
Oh, here we go.
Sarcasm?
So the top of a narrowboat is not straight, it's arched. And the top of a narrowboat is narrower than the bottom of a narrowboat because the walls kind of go like that. Most people, well, not most, but there are three different ways really of lining out a narrowboat ceiling, and you have to consider cable runs. So some people put a cable run tray in the middle, and some people put a cable run tray at the side. And there are a couple of different advantages to both methods depending on what you want to do. So let's take the tray down the middle option. We have a tray down the middle of the boat for all the cables and the mushroom vents, etc. And that means then that in reality you can take an 8x4 sheet of plywood and you can split it down the middle to give you 8 foot by 2 foot either side. And this is typically about 4.5 foot, 4 foot 8. So you can then put your plywood at the side of that channel and it goes all the way up. That way you really only need about 5 sheets of plywood to cover the whole ceiling. And the cost of plywood at the moment is astronomical, so that's not a bad thing. The downside is you've got a big tray sitting in the middle of your boat and it's quite a traditional look, but it's not the kind of look that we're after. Plus I've scraped my head on it. So the other option is cable trays at the edge. And that gives you a nice flat roof, certainly, but then you've got a little bit of trims either side. And the reason for the trims is, if you think about it, you've got an 8x4 sheet of plywood. This really is around 4 foot 8 inches in old money, or about 1450 millimeters. So you end up with having to put filler bits either side of your main sheet of plywood, which is okay, but you know, narrow boats expand and contract, so there needs to be a bit of a gap, around 3 or 4 millimeters as a gap to allow the wood to move. And now you can use your 5 sheets of plywood straight up the middle and it's nice and smooth, but you need an extra 2 sheets of plywood to cut those filler bits to go all the way up the boat. So instead of 5, you're looking at 7-ish sheets of plywood. And you can put your cable trays under these filler bits depending on how your battening is done. So we've designed our battening to go under those filler bits rather than having to lift it out and make a box. It was just a careful design consideration. But now that we're thinking about it, we can do something else as well. So instead of big long sheets of plywood, some people put tongue and groove on their ceiling, cladding. And actually, we quite like that. The downside is that this cladding comes in standard sizes, either 98mm or 120mm, sometimes 150. And we didn't like the width of them. We were looking for narrower plywood. But that was kind of option number one for us.
Well, here's another option for you.
So we've tried to do something a bit different. It's quite trendy at the moment to use slat wall. These are about 12mm strips of wood, about 20mm wide, and you just run them along the whole roof. That would actually look, we think, really nice. Most people put them on the wall, you know, like as a cladding for bathrooms and stuff. So I ordered this sample, and it bends great, which means it would go on the ceiling quite nice. But the downside is that the backing is felt. Okay, and you put that in a narrowboat, first time it gets wet, it's done, it's disintegrated, there isn't any chance. So we thought, is there another option? So we ordered a sample of a slat wall panel that is designed for bathrooms. It's a bit narrower in terms of definition of the slats, but unfortunately it is MDF and it is absolutely rock solid rigid. There is no way that is going to bend round the shape of the roof at all. So we decided to try and make our own. So I had a spare bit of ply and I just painted it black, this cheap tester pot of black paint. And then I cut a whole load of strips of ply from this piece of scrap that I had. So having cut them, I decided to lay them out to see if it would work. So one slat, this is a 12mm spacer. Another slat. Line that up nicely against the spacer. And you keep going. Try not to move the spacer when I take the thing out. Yeah. And that is our very own slat wall. Now we like the size, that we like the wider slats. I think it looks nice. I think in the ceiling you need the spacing on the ceiling. We think if it's too narrow, it'll just look it'll bring the visual aspect of the ceiling too low. So those seem to be about the right size. But there's other considerations. So the other considerations is really what to do with either side of your 4 foot wide sheet of plywood. So as I said earlier that you can put channels down the side. So if this is 4'8" width, and you've got a 4 foot piece of ply, you need fillets to go in. But that gives you a big long line all the way up, which doesn't look so nice. So I've been trying to figure out a way to see if we can get these slats covering that gap, like that, and all the way over, and that way it looks completely symmetrical, completely flat. Now, these slats won't be fitted on both sides, because if there's cables underneath this edge trim, we need to be able to get to those cables. For whatever, we need to get to those cables. So we'd only fit it on this side, leave that, maybe with a bit of mastic, but leave it kind of free so that you can lift the thing away and you've got access to the cables underneath. And when you put it back, it's back lovely, back to your seamless view. So now it's back to basic maths, school maths, areas of rectangles and division. So we know that our roof space is, let's call it rectangular, taken into the curve, is 1, 4, 3, 4. I'm not really worried about the height of it. That'll come when we work out how many slats and how much linear meters we need of slats. But if it's 1, 4, 3, 4, I've got a slat of 45 millimeters plus a spacer of 12 millimeters. So 57 millimeters is the total space of the slats. And it's a simple case of divide that by the 57 and it will give you an estimate of how many slats we need. And that comes out at 25.15. So a tiny little millimeter at the end of each thing here, and that's absolutely fine to work with. However, it's not quite like that. This sheet of ply, it's going to go against the side walls, and the side walls already have plywood sheeting on it at 9 millimeters. So we need to take off basically 18 millimeters from that side. So 1434 minus 18 divided by 52 is 24.84. So still 25 slats. We might have to trim the end slats down a bit. So we'll take a saw or a router and just pull a bit off of that as needed. So that's it, right? 25 slats we need. Okay, we know typically these slats come in, strip wood comes in 2 400 millimeters, 8 feet. Sometimes it comes in 3000 millimeters or 9 foot. We know our sheet of ply is 8 foot long, and those strips will go there. So I know I can buy 25 strips of wood to fill one sheet of plywood. Job's a good one. So then we look at, well, where's it going to go? It's going to go in the galley, the dinette, and the saloon. So I know that the galley, whoa, that's a terrible drawing. The galley is 9 foot, the saloon is 6 foot, and 12 foot, 6 foot and 9 foot for the saloon. Simple maths again. How much do we need? Well, 3.5 bits will do it fine. So 3 sheets will do it fine. So that's a total of 27 foot, which is really 3.5 8x4 panels. Now I know then that I need 25 strips per panel times 3.5. So we've also been figuring out how to install it. Now we could put the ply on the ceiling, screw the ply in, quite happily screw the ply in, and then fasten the slats to it as long as we have a really good centre point datum. So I looked at it and went, well, what if we nail it? I don't know if the camera will pick that up, but we can nail it with pin nails, but you still get a bit of a nail head showing. So you'd have to punch them below the surface and fill them in before you varnish. So you might end up with a little discoloration around the filler. So I'm still thinking about how to do the fitting. If I fit it all on the bench, then we've got to lift the whole thing up, and that's quite heavy, and we'll need more than the 2 of us to do that. There is, however, I think, an advantage to nailing, certainly from the surface. If we don't glue it down and we just nail it up, then if we get fed up with it, we can kind of pop it off and remove the nails and repaint the ply. Not sure. The alternative is fix it from underneath first. So go along, lay them all out, pop some nails from the underneath, and then when we fit it up onto the roof. But that is heavy. And the last consideration I think I've got is, what do we do? We've talked about the joins down the side of the plywood. What do we do with the joins across the plywood? Those will be on a rib from the ceiling. And we know that effectively the panels are the length of the strip wood is going to be the same length as the 8-foot sheet of ply. So you're just going to get a big long line right across where the join is, and you can see this is cheap ply, it's all bent. So we end up with a kind of nice, hopefully symmetrical line. We can use tile spacers to guarantee it, but that's kind of one option. But I have another thought. So I'm thinking in staggering both the slat joints right across the primary cladding joint. So we'll still have a gap. I think I can fill it with some black mastic, some black caulking, and take it away. But this way we won't get a very symmetrical line every 8 foot, and because it's 8.5 foot or 27 foot long, or 3.5 boards, I would end up with a small piece of battening or strip wood right along the far edge at the bulkhead. So I'm thinking if I stagger it, it might be prettier. I'm still thinking about that, but even now when I look at it, I think it's the right way to do it. You can stagger lots of things, and you'll end up with not making it invisible, but certainly making it less noticeable. I quite like that. I think we might end up going with it. Let me know what you think in the comments. I quite value that opinion. So that's how I think we can do a slat wall styly on our ceiling. But I'm still nervy about whether that's a 45mm piece of strip wood in a 12mm gap, or a 46 or a 48 or a 58 or a 50mm. The reason we chose 45 is because I was looking at the strip wood, and it comes in those kind of standard sizes. It's 45mm, 44, depending where you go. And then the next one is 58, the next one is 68 standard strip wood that you can get from the wood supplier. So I was trying to make it work that if I get some standard ones, it's less work. We don't have to trim everything up. And yes, I could cut it all on a table saw to the exact size that we want, but I don't have a table saw. So, nope. I'm trying to put an 8-foot sheet of ply through a sight table saw. Is kind of a challenge. Not going to do that. So looking at the standard widths that we can get down the road in the lumberyard, good quality stripwood pine is quite expensive. Surprisingly more expensive than the oak stripwood par, planed all round timber. So I'm still looking at the numbers and still looking at the cost. Either way, it's not as cheap as just throwing up some sheets of ply. It is going to take some effort, and it is going to cost us about £800 or so to do, which is a budget consideration. Let's put it that way. So, in order to make it work, I thought, there's only really one way to do this. Let me try and draw it out. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to see if I can draw it out on a piece of paper to scale, to make sure that those bits of stripwood will cover the gaps that I hope they will. Okay, so I've set up a workbench. I've rolled out some paper, actually just wallpaper, lining paper. And I'm going to try and mark it all out, find the dead centre of my 1434 less 18, and we'll take it from there. I'll be back in a second when I've done it. Okay, so I've marked out my board. That's 1416mm wide bit of paper representing the roof with the curve taken into account. I've worked out the centre line, and then I've worked out the size, or the big black lines, the size of an 8x4 1220mm wide sheet of ply, and therefore what fillet I need at either end. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to work it out right dead centre. From there I'll work out the 45mm slats and the 12mm spacers, and if I've done my maths right, I'll get somewhere close to about there and an overlap. I need to figure that out, but that's the whole point of the exercise. Draw it out, measure 75 times, cut once. Right, using a flat ruler because it's just so much easier. 45mm divided by 2 is 22.5. We'll measure that either side. We'll do the same at the bottom. 22.5. So that's a piece of strip wood, dead centre. I made this table that we're working on, it's more or less square. There's bits of it where my cutting wasn't brilliant, but I know it's okay. I made it from a big 8mm, 18mm piece of ply, 3/4 inch ply that I had spare when I used to make model railways. Made it quite big actually, huge thing, the length of these saw tables, but won't fit on a narrowboat, so I cut it in half and put some strengthener joists on it, and that works. So look, there you are, 45mm, dead centre. And it's not quite lining up. Why is that then? Is that 45mm? It is 45mm. Why is that 50 odds? So of course it's not 25mm as I measured. Duh! It's 21, 2.5. Yes, stupid doughball. And all you people who have been watching this video and are looking at it going, don't! Yeah, right, thanks. Thanks very much. We'll do that again. The result of being old, that's what I put it down to. Stupid. Old and stupid, look at that, that's better. See straight away, that's better. Right, so, lesson learned when I come to do the real thing. Measure 85 times and learn how to use a ruler in mathematics. That's better. Stupid idiot. Right. Inner line. Yep, that's correct. Perfect. So, look, on the plus side, that's why I'm measuring it out. That was so traumatic, I went for a cup of tea. Okay, so here we measure 12mm either side of that. Make sure it is 12mm. There you go. Make sure we choose the right line. And the 12mm, of course, is our spacer. The gap. Move my cuppa. And 12mm there. And 12mm there. Maybe get a bigger one of them. Bit of test wood. And that's looking correct. I have successfully learned how to use a ruler. Right, so if I do that, and I do that, I can now see my slat wall taking shape. Good. Right, so I'm going to continue on with this, marking out 12mm, 45mm, all the way up to the end. Right, I've done some and then I've just went, okay, I'll just use these bits of wood that I've got, carefully put them on the lines that I made. It saves me measuring every single line. Like that. Now, narrow boats, I know that when I got on the boat, it's not going to be millimetre perfect. I know that. So this is an experiment to see if the theory works. And I'm pretty sure that it's a bit bent. That's better. I'm sure that when I get onto the boat and we start doing it properly, I mean, there's no way that it's going to be exactly 12mm wide. It's going to move a little bit depending on the temperature of the boat and all that sort of stuff. So we're looking for, what is the term? Good enough. Good enough. That'll do me. And as long as it looks really quite symmetrical and it hasn't wandered off some kind of skewy angle like this, it'll be okay. So I'm just going to continue doing this until I get to the exciting bit, which is where it joins the gap. Okay, so I've done all the way up. This is going to be the join in theory. So here's a piece of strip wood, 45mm, and darn, the join is there. But it's only a millimetre. So I want to push it out a bit. So I think then that instead of this being a 12mm gap, what's that in old money? It's about half an inch. Yeah, it's about half an inch. Having a look at a ruler to tell me. If I make that 13 or 14mm, just doing the sums in my head, that would push that over to where I want it to be. You try the other side with a 14mm gap. So slat walls typically, they say that the gap should be half of the width of your slat, but half of the width of the slat is just too much. Really, it's 22mm. That's way too big. But if I try it at 14 or 15, which still is visually okay, then it'll overlap. I can see it's going to overlap. It is literally just, the edge is just there. I just need to push it over just that millimetre. So there are 10 spacers in this half of the ceiling part. There are 10 spacers. If I add another 2mm onto that, that pushes over 20mm, which is there, which is bang on, really. So the maths are that it needs to be a bit of an even number. So 45, maybe that was the mistake that I made, that we're using 57 as a divisor. Maybe it needs to be 58. So that'll add an extra 10mm on. And whatever that is, 10mm is just tiny. It'll cover it by the extra 10mm. If we move that by, yeah, that would work. Let me do the other side with a 14 and we'll see what it looks like. And again, and I know that when we go on the boat, I'll probably need to adjust it again, but having the numbers in my head on a piece of paper means that when we come down to it, we get on the boat and we go, actually, you know, it isn't 1416 mil, it's 1410. And I can adjust everything accordingly. Then we do the other side. So I've been waffling on for so long that my microphone died. But here's the other side, and it works out exactly as it should, right over the join, which is perfect. Now I've worked out, ended up using 15mm strips, because that's what you can get at the lumber yard. But if you think about it, depending on the idea of the 12mm gap was because the thickness of the slats were 12mm, and I can just turn one on its side and use that as a spacing. If I get 15mm thick slats, I can turn that on its side and it becomes the spacer. So it's just a lot easier to manage. And then the final part to check is just the end strip. So it won't be 45mm at the end, it will be a bit wider, around about 6 to 8, which is again fine because that's one of the standard sizes that strip wood comes in, so job's a good one. So for me that was a really useful exercise. I kind of worked out the math, worked out how many strips of slat that we need, strip wood. Laying it out though was brilliant. It was visually, I've got the space to do it, and it was visually helpful. So we've realised that the 12mm gap is probably a bit low. 14mm or maybe 15 if I can get the standard piece of strip wood, because I'm looking for that standard bit. What's the point of trying to make a 14mm thick bit of spacer? If I can buy it off the shelf, better. So it's just a matter of looking now and saying, right, what is the spacers I can get? I know it all fits right at the very end, where there is a gap, identified that actually the piece of strip wood that I need is 6 to 8mm, and that's a standard off the shelf piece of strip wood. So I'm kind of tempted to go down the, let me find some really good strip wood, try and get it as knot free as possible rather than trying to cut strips and strips and strips of, say, oak veneer ply, sanding it all down, filling up all the edges, or making the iron-on lining, the iron-on edging strip stuff on 88 sheet strips of ply. Actually, it's not 88, it's 2 sides or 4 sides. So, yes, I would quickly lose the will to live, I think, doing that. So let me go and see if I can find some strip wood. But I know the math works. The math really works, and it would look fantastic on the ceiling. So, useful exercise. Pity my microphone ran out of power. But yeah, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you think it's a great idea to do a slat wall on the ceiling or completely bonkers. And if you've done it, because I haven't seen any narrow boats with it, but if you've done it, I would value any feedback. Thanks. So, thanks for watching. See you next time. Hopefully no, I can't swear. The boat will be in the water, and we can video that. So I do know that the windows have gone in. I had a little video of that, but it's 30 seconds of video, and I'll put up as a short soon. But yeah, boat in the water is a huge milestone, because that'll be it finished. And until that happens, I might continue doing little things like this.